So then you can say, okay, and then we start. So I welcome our dear friend Judith Duboff to this new webinar. And so um, Judith has, well, she has achieved many. Oh, sorry, I lost the exact titles, but um, she is a great professional in art therapy and has been um, creating educational programs in art therapy in the United States, in New York. And she also, um, uh, if you correct me, she graduated from NYU, and anyway, she is now living in in Atenas, where I met her. And so we created this special bond because we both work through the arts, and I know that she has done so many research and she has such an amazing experience that I invited her to to share a bit of her knowledge. A bit, I guess, because it's only few minutes, it's an hour, but despite that, we are thirsty of all this that you can bring to us. And so thank you once again for being here. And the space is yours, Judy. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. And I'm very, very grateful to be here. And so, for those of you who don't know me, I'm 80 years old. I've been a therapist for half my life. I've been an artist since I was a child. I've had a spiritual practice since I was 20. I've experienced therapy, and I've worked with indigenous elders and the mountains in Peru. When Sylvia invited me to give this talk, I thought it would only be for creative arts therapists or students. And then she suggested I invite my friends. So the title, Wisdom and Compassion, the Essence of Good Therapy, is only part of what this talk will be about. First, I need to say that I left out the third important quality, which my friend Terry reminded me of, which is connection. Connection to ourselves and to the world, the universe, and to whoever we would be speaking to or working with. And I believe that these qualities are essential in all our lives, not just as a therapist, but for everyone. And the problem is, how do we live in these spaces in ourselves without getting stuck in our thoughts and our feelings and our wishes of our bodies? Times of change and transition are particularly difficult, both in our personal lives and in the global community. The indigenous people say that this is the time of the great turning, when things collapse and eventually the indigenous ways of living will return. It is a big threshold we are all standing in front of, and the more we can live from our hearts and our creativity and stay connected to our true nature, we will be able to witness the changes with more grace and acceptance. The purpose of this talk is to show how creative expressions can help everyone and the necessity to get out of your own needs when you're working as a therapist. I will share my history and experiences in the hope that it can illustrate how my creative work helped me to move through many endings and beginnings and connect to my essential being. So to start with, I was very blessed to grow up in an upper middle class community in the suburbs of New York City. Um, I had an easy life, but my parents were not religious at all or spiritual at all. Um, and so I didn't have any religious training. Um, I did have a fantastic grandmother, though, who's I was the first grandchild, and I got to spend lots and lots of time with her. And we did painting, and we made music, and we did gardening, and we went for hikes. And so all the things that have sustained me in my life, she showed me, and I got to experience. And as I was growing up, I found that making art and music provided me that connection that brought myself together. And I was focused on something bigger than me. So I wasn't obsessed with my problems and everything that was going on around me. And so I wanted to pursue my artistic career. I went to Rhode Island School of Design, and which was supposed to be a really great art school in Rhode Island. And I had the worst painting teacher in the world who said my painting had too much green and couldn't explain why, And so I went down to the ceramics department. I had a really good friend there, and I was venting. And she said, "So just switch, take, become a ceramics major." And I thought, well, okay, if I make a pot, I'll be able to know if it falls or collapses myself. And so I did switch, and it brought me something much more than I had expected, because my first teacher was Vivica Heino, and she made us read the book Zen and the Art of Archery. And that book had a big impact on me and how I approached art and life. And so I'm just going to read you a little paragraph of what really affected me. The pupil remembers that more important than all outward works, however attractive, is the inward work which he has to accomplish if he is to fulfill his vocation as an artist. The inward work, however, consists of in his turning the man he is and the self he feels himself and perpetually finds himself to be into the raw material of a training and shaping whose end is mastery. In it, the artist and the human being meet in something higher, for mastery proves its validity as a form of life only when it dwells in the boundless truth. And then later it says, all right doing is accomplished only in a state of true selflessness, in which the doer cannot be present any longer as himself. Only the spirit is present, a kind of awareness which shows no trace of egohood. And so this was really struck a chord in me. And after RISD, I went to New York City, and I was lucky enough to become a partner in a pottery studio on East 6th Street. And I was giving classes and making pots. And my first private student um, was Barry Jacobs, who ended up being my husband. And he introduced me to his teacher, Mr. Nyland, who was teaching the ideas of Gurdjieff. And I'd heard of Gurdjieff because my grandmother had sold a house to the head of the foundation in New York. So it was a name recognition. And I went to a meeting, and Mr. Nyland was this old man, then old, he was in his 70s, who just emanated compassion and wisdom and everything that I really wanted to have in my life. And so I started studying with him, and I was particularly um, doing movements, which are sacred dances, particularly was a way for me to connect with something greater than me. And it was very, very important. And so I'll give you an example now of a really bad therapist because I didn't grow up wanting to be a therapist. And I suffered from bouts of depression. And when I first moved to New York, I was depressed, and my parents paid for me to go to a really expensive psychiatrist on Park Avenue who was terrible. And so after a while, we were going to go to California, and the whole group, the Gurdjieff group, was going with our teacher. We were going to go across the country and then spend some time in California. And so we had decided that we were going to move there. And I told my therapist, I have to stop therapy because I I'm going to California. And he said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "San Francisco." And he said, "Oh my God, don't go there. They have the highest suicide rate in the world." And
Mhm.
I said, I never really thought about suicide before, but, and then he also said he was very psychoanalytic and he wouldn't talk until I talked. And so we had a lot of times where nobody said anything. And he said, you couldn't form a relationship with me, so you're never going to be able to have a good relationship with anybody. So that was my therapy experience. Anyway, I went to California, um, and then I had my daughter, became a mother, and that kind of changed. But that was a big change in my life because once you have a child, you're no longer the most important thing. And so my parents were in New York. My teacher was mostly in New York. So we moved back to New York, up in the country, about an hour and a half from New York City, and tried to reinvent ourselves again to make money. And um, so in the beginning, I didn't really have to make money because my husband did. And so I was involved in teaching my daughter's school, her kindergarten. We had our own little school. And so then I got a divorce, and things had gotten really hard in our relationship. And I had to leave. And so again, it was another threshold to a new stage of life. And I had a pottery business that wasn't paying for, it wasn't enough. And so I got a job at a day treatment program for disturbed adults as kind of an activity therapist. They hired me as a therapist aide, so they didn't have to pay me much. And they trained me to do group therapy with 10 emotionally disturbed adults, and individual therapy. And then I would do art and music and gardening and all kinds of things with people. And I really enjoyed that. And so I realized, though, that if I was going to really take care of me and my daughter, I needed to make some more money. And I had a friend who was a teacher at NYU in the art therapy department. And she suggested that I become an art therapist. And I thought, well, I've had so many bad therapists. It would be really good to be a good therapist. Um, so I went to NYU, and the one of the, I guess actually the founder of the the department there was Edith Kramer, who was one of the founders of art therapy in the United States. And so she was one of my teachers, and she's written a lot of materials. And I'm just going to read a little bit from a book, Art as Therapy, that she wrote, um, because it really informed my practice. To assist in processes whereby pictorial communications of a very personal material become therapeutically fruitful, art therapists must cultivate special faculties. They must cultivate a third eye trained to perceive the multifaceted messages embodied in artwork produced in the course of art therapy, messages that may defy translation into words. However, a third eye is not always enough. In conjunction with this special vision, art therapists must also command a third hand, a hand that helps the creative process along without distorting meaning or imposing pictorial ideas or preferences alien to the client. The third hand must be capable of conducting pictorial dialogues that complement or replace verbal exchange. Like other artists, art therapists must attain fundamental graphic, painting, and sculptural skills and understanding. But unlike other artists who might concentrate solely on developing their own styles, art therapists must learn to subordinate personal style when working with clients. They must cultivate an area of artistic competence distinct from their own artistic struggles and predicaments, a conflict-free sphere wherein technical skill, pictorial imagination, ingenuity, and capacity to improvise are employed solely for empathetic service to others. So you need to really get out of your own way to get connected with yourself and with others. And so um, it was a very intense training because I lived an hour and a half from the school and I had a full-time job and I was a single parent and I had a 6-year-old daughter. And luckily, I had a really good friend with a daughter her age who she would stay overnight there one night a week, and I would go down and take classes, all the classes that were offered that night until it was time to do internships. And then I had to work in different facilities and as an art therapy student. And then there were supervisors there, art therapy supervisors. And then we also had a supervisor at NYU. And so we had double supervision, which was actually the most important part of my training because, you know, it really helps to have supervision when you're trying to do therapy. Anyway, so before that ended, I started a relationship with a man that I had been friends with who was in California, and he had come to visit, and we got involved romantically. And so the first year of our relationship, we were writing letters to each other. And one of the things that made me really fall in love with him was this poem that he wrote me. And I found this recently, so I'm going to read it. For Judy, jaguars move with stealth ease. I see them smiling at death as weaker animals scamper away. I turn and you are standing there. The sun comes out and we both look at the sparkles of rain in the leaves, on the leaves, lit up by the early sun. I tell you I love you and you smile as we continue our walk. Love, Bill. And that just got me. So at the end of that year, Bill and his son moved in with us in New York. Um, his son was 14, my daughter was 10. I learned a lot about reblended families and what goes on and the difficulties and wonderful things too. But anyway, I got a really good job after I graduated from NYU at a place called Idelson Center. It was a residential treatment center for schizophrenic children between the ages of 5 and 12. And when I was hired, it was run by a psychiatrist who specialized in schizophrenic children. And it was a fabulous place. It was in a big mansion. And so the setting was lovely. And um, the, the there were a team of psychiatrists who provided therapy for the children, and art therapy was an adjunctive to that. And the social workers only worked with the families, and the psychologists only did testing. And but I was the first art therapist, and I got to develop the program, which was really exciting. And I had NYU interns come and work with me. Um, and after a few years, Dr. Goldfarb retired, and a psychologist who had been an Israeli Air Force pilot before he became a psychologist took over the directorship. And luckily for me, after he finished his stint in the Air Force, he went in the mountains for 2 months and painted. So he really understood the value of art therapy. And so he changed everything around. He said everyone should do primary therapy. The psychiatrist should only administer medication if the kids need it, and most of the children weren't even on medication at that point. And so he supervised me for 2 years doing individual therapy and bringing art therapy into it. And he insisted that I have my interns for a whole year, which was unheard of because they weren't supposed to have to do it in the summer. But I always got two students who wanted to come because it was such a great place. And so I was there for 12 years, and it was a wonderful experience. And then I also got training from a family therapist to do family therapy because these children would go back home and the parents needed to understand how to help the children, because a lot of the problems came from the family dynamics, of course. So I had a lot of different art therapy experiences there. One that I remember most was this little boy who was about 8 years old. He was lived in a fantasy world, very schizophrenic, very um, scared. And he would make volcanoes out of clay. And clay was such a wonderful medium for those kids because they could put a lot of aggression in it, they could form it, they could destroy it, and it was safe. But he would make volcanoes and he would make people, and all the people then were going to get killed by the lava. And he would do this over and over again, and I would have to help him to make it happen, and I would have to, let it be. And finally, after about, I don't know, a year or so, he made a volcano and it was not going to explode and kill all the people. But when I put it in the kiln, it exploded all over the place. And so I had to fix it. And that was also part of my job as an art therapist to make sure that the pieces were repaired and fixed. So it was really beyond gluing. So I had to build another one that looked exactly like that one. And he didn't notice, thank God. And so that was a very wonderful situation. Um, after uh, part of the time when I was involved there, I also I started going to workshops with a friend who had been to Peru, and she had had experiences with the elders there, and I was very interested in that because their teaching really it struck something in me. And so she had these healing stones um, that she brought back, and she said to me, "Well, you're a potter. Why don't you make healing stones?" And so I made them, but I wanted to see how the elders felt about it because, this American lady telling me to do that, I didn't know. So I went to Peru and I went 6 times and I worked with the elders and we did ceremony in the mountains and they blessed the stones and it was a life-changing period. And I learned so much about their culture of gratitude and their culture of Aini, which was reciprocity, and having to ask permission of the spaces and of the if you're going to pick a flower, ask permission. And it just um, gave me a whole expanded way of looking at things. So anyway, after 12 years, I got tired of commuting, and my children had gone off to college and school, and I decided to try to have a private practice up in the country, which was a difficult thing. So for the first year, I worked for the Mental Health Association, and we did a project called the Invisible Children's Project, which was really interesting because we found that children of mentally ill parents who had one person who cared for them unconditionally and mentored them, they would grow up to be just fine. And many of the other children were damaged. But that was a really interesting thing. And I got to work with a lot of those children doing art therapy. And then I also, after that, worked at a clinic where we worked with children who were sent from the courts. They'd either been physically or sexually abused, most of them, and taken out of the homes. And so I got to do primary therapy, art therapy with them. And I had one girl who was about 9 years old. She'd been sexually abused by a stepfather. He was now in jail. She was in foster care. And in the beginning, she would do paintings of graveyards and monsters and lots of blood. And she was pretty suicidal and unhappy, feeling guilty, feeling like it was her fault. And so we worked for probably about a year. And by the end, she was doing pictures of gardens with flowers. And she was really able to accept that, she was okay. It wasn't her fault. And, that was very satisfying. And I learned a lot. So then I was lucky enough to find this big house nearby um, to rent with two friends of mine who actually had the same names as my childhood friends, Kathy and Nora. And so I figured that was a sign that this was meant to be something great. And so we rented this house. They were both therapists. And in the basement, I had a big pottery studio where I taught classes. And on the first floor in the dining room, I had an art therapy studio. And I had we had a waiting room in the living room. And upstairs, they each had therapy rooms. And I eventually had a healing room because it became an acupressurist also. But so I spent many, many years, um, clients and students and acupressure clients. And it was a really amazing community. And I learned a lot about working with families because people would bring their children, and I know that you can't fix a child by themselves. And so I would try to work with the whole family. And the most successful cases were when the parents were actually willing to do the work too. And it was really exciting when that would happen. And then I went to a assisted living place where a 90-year-old woman was, and I helped her to make sculptures. And she would make um, guardian angels for her friends and people she was worried about. And it was so beautiful that actually informed me to start making guardian angels sometimes. And I also worked with a woman with Alzheimer's in a memory care unit. And she couldn't really form everything by herself, but with my help, we could make little scenes and little things that she loved. And that was also very satisfying. So um, then we moved to Costa Rica. Bill and we got rid of everything and brought 3 suitcases down apiece, and we were ready for a new life, going through a new threshold. And so I didn't realize how hard that would be to actually change, because it was a change that I really wanted. But luckily, I joined a meditation group given by my friend Barb, because I really wanted to get to know people who had some kind of a spiritual interest in their lives. And I made some of my very best friends there. And I also was lucky enough to meet the wife of one of the people, Roberta, who had a pottery studio. And she was so good to me. And so at that time, I was having a hard time adjusting. And she gave me clay, and I made this sculpture of myself nesting. There was a big tree behind my house, and it just really helped me to ground myself and be here. And then I started making sculptures of
We cannot hear you anymore, Judy. There is something with your microphone. We cannot hear you.
Cannot hear you. Can you switch mics?
Or it's on the computer.
we're
That could be
working
the
on it.
problem.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Now we can hear you.
We can hear you. Good, Judy.
Good.
You go back to where you first started talking about the piece you're holding. We didn't hear any of it.
Okay, this was the ceramics club that we had with Roberta and Nancy, another potter, and we would share the things that we made together. And I was doing some acupressure. I bought a table, and so I did that. And I was playing my guitar. I bought another guitar, and my husband was gardening. And so making these figures really helped me to stay present and to stay creative. And then COVID hit. And so that was another change. And so this was what I made. We had some neighborhood dogs that we kind of helped raise at that point, and we would play cards every night. And that kept us from going too stir crazy. And I did yoga at home. I made lots of sculptures of myself doing yoga. And so those things all really helped to keep me alive during that period. And after COVID, I had a very dear friend who was dying of cancer, brain cancer. And she was with her daughter, and they had these wonderful Zooms where we would meet with her for the 6 months when she was fading, and she was able to be with us. And so I made this sculpture of her and her daughter, and that helped me deal with my grief because I was able to put it into a form. And then we got a dog. The dog got us. She discovered us. And so this was my celebrating her. And so my husband got sick, and that kind of took over our lives for the next period. And when he was sick, where is it? Oh, I made him a guardian angel. And I did all these things to try to help bring creativity into the situation. Things that could help him. And so eventually he passed away, and I did I made collages for the memorial, and that was very helpful. And so after he died, I'd never done any poetry. I've always done visual arts. And my friend Jan took me to a poetry workshop, and I wrote a poem, and I'm going to read it because it was really helpful to me. And the prompt was to use the same sentence in the beginning and the end of the poem. So he died the end of July. It started 2 years before, the stain on the X-ray and his desire to just let nature take its course. He never thought he would live to see 80 anyway. The path was strewn with cacao trees and dogs and lightness of being, but turned to anguish and pain and so much unrest. He needed me to fix the pain. Not possible. He begged over and over, night and day. All I wanted to do was get some sleep. Our friends appeared as angels, filling in the spaces. Me, who wants to fix everything, had to surrender. A feeling of gratitude for the love surrounding us, so much love, more than I'd ever experienced. The end was the beginning of a new life, knowing that love is always present. It just takes different forms. I am filled with love for Bill and everyone and myself. Impermanence and suffering, doors I had to walk through to reach the center of my life and to know what is most important. He died the end of July. And I was surprised that so much came out in that poem. I really had no idea that poetry could be so helpful. And so as I went through my grieving process, one of the things that I did was he was buried in the cemetery, and I made a gravestone for him. And this was one of my rejects because it's not good, but took me months. I had to practice my calligraphy. I had to do lots and lots of stuff. I hadn't done calligraphy since art school. And so um, that was just really, really wonderful to just keep honoring him and keep being in touch. And the other thing that's been really useful is I have this moon group that my daughter and I started. And every 2 weeks, when there's a full moon or a new moon, we get together on Zoom, and different people have joined us. And we just talk and we make pictures, whatever we want to make. Um, and I've kind of made it into an autobiographical art therapy exercise for myself. But these are just a few of them. And it's just been a wonderful, wonderful way to connect and keep my creativity going, you know. And so the last thing I'm just going to show you is a thing I made in clay, and it was based on something I saw on Facebook, which was a lady with a big hat and a dog on the beach. And she was saying, there was a caption saying, and we lived happily ever after. And so that's what that represents to me. So I've gone through many thresholds of change, and I don't know, we don't have a lot of time, but I wanted to do a little experiential with you. I didn't ask people to bring art materials, but I want to do a little short guided imagery and just help you also, people going through thresholds, even if it's not a personal threshold, it's the world is going through changes. And so what do you want to bring with you? What do you need to let go of to get to the next stage? So let's just, sit, get grounded, you can close your eyes, take a deep breath, try to connect with yourself, let all your tensions drain out. And just imagine that you're sitting in front of a great doorway to your next step. And maybe you've started through it, but it takes a long time to get through. It's not in linear time. And so as you're sitting there and imagining this doorway, try to see what it is that you want to bring to it. How do you want to walk through? What do you need to let go of? Resentments, angers, things, people, old ideas, old self-images. And how would you like to be when you're entering your next stage? What's your intention? And how are you going to do that? And as you're sitting with yourself, you may have ideas that you want to draw or paint or sculpt or write about. And maybe in your own time later, you could do that for yourself. And unfortunately, we don't have time now. But when you're ready, come back into your body. Take another deep breath and ground yourself in the here and now and open your eyes. And so that's what I wanted to share. And, I'm going through this threshold. I gave myself a year to do really nothing much, just grieve and be gentle to myself. And now I'm ready to go back into the world. And if any of you have any need for any of my services or help, I'm available. So thank you very much for your time. And I don't know if we have time for
Yeah.
any questions. Yeah.
Yes, we do have time. Thank you, Judith. It was so wonderfully weaved, and to hear it from you, like it, it really meant a lot to me. And just once again, I'm very, very sorry for your loss. I met your husband, and he's very dear to me too. So anyway, thank you for sharing all of these intimate spaces of your life with us. And also, I wanted to open the space for people who are present with us. If you have any questions, not without letting you all know that Judith is indeed giving therapy in Atenas. And not only also can you help me with that?
Pressure.
Acupressure, yes, acupressure sessions and art therapy as well. And so you can reach out to her. Maybe you can give us your phone number, and so that people know how to reach you. And then yes, open the space for questions. So uh, if anyone has
Okay.
a question, yes.
Okay. So my email is jduboff123@gmail.com. And my phone number, which if you're not in Atenas or Costa Rica, is you can get on me on WhatsApp, is 506 8515 1844. So,
Yes. And remember, these days we can also have a therapy online. So
yes.
don't stress if she's not in New York and if she's in Costa Rica having a great weather in
Sorry,
Athens.
could you repeat the number, please?
See,
Um, 506 8515 1844. But
Thank
only
you.
use that number if you're on WhatsApp.
it's written on the messages for everybody. I think Judy was able to write it down. And then yes, we open for
I think
questions.
she just said that. Yeah.
And now,
So
sorry.
I just wondered if anyone had a question.
Yes, now we open the space for questions.
I'd
Yeah.
like to first of all thank you. It's been very moving to listen to you. And I'd like to ask about the Israeli director, ex-pilot, his name.
Oh, Jacob Barak.
Thank you.
Ruth is a very good friend of mine. She lives in El Salvador and she is part
Aha.
of the network of people working through the arts in Latin America. So
It's been
Wonderful.
very, very nice to meet you.
Thank you.
yes. So let's see.
I don't have a question, but I just want to make a comment.
Yes.
So Judy, I really want to thank you for sharing yourself and your experience. And I just want to say, as a fellow therapist myself, that in a world, and this is kind of exciting, where we're seeing such progression in therapy and the way of expressing, it seems like the new buzzword in therapy is all about internal expression. And when I listen to Judy talk, what's really beautiful is breath work. And I think art therapy are two of the oldest and the first forerunning forms of nonverbal expression that started to come out for people. And I just want to say that it's become such an important journey for people who have experienced trauma and maybe can't express themselves verbally. So I want to thank Judy for lending your service to others in that direction, and for people, as you talked about, who are chronically mentally ill or who have conditions beyond their control, maybe can't express in a way that the general population can understand, but they express in a way that is unique to themselves. And I think, as Judy shared, when you put yourself in that sacred space, how beautiful that is to uh, have what we call in the Andean path a tupai, which is a meeting of spirit, a meeting between one another. And I think when Judy talked, that's a lot of what her work embraced, which was beautiful. And just to listen to you talk, Judy, was an affirmation of your own journey with your own art and how it not only inspired you to do it as a profession, but has continued to be a main form in which you allow yourself to be expressed, not only to you, but to others. So I really want to thank you for sharing all of those intimate details, because it's really beautiful to listen to the journey of a therapist, of people who so often are in the background. It's so beautiful to hear you come center stage and share your beautiful journey and your work with us.
Thank you, Terry. Yeah, the other thing I want to say, I know so many people work for peace and work together, and I just believe that the work begins in ourselves and that we have to really look at ourselves so that we can get along with each other when we're working for the good. Because in so many groups, there's so much conflict, and we all need to own our own stuff. So anybody else?
Inika. Yes.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Enika, and I actually was one of Judy's patients as a youngster. I don't even remember how old I was. I was certainly a teenager, going through
Yeah.
challenges in my life. And it was through Judy that I learned a lot about holistic practices and mindfulness. And my life and the journey of my life has continued with these foundational thoughts. I would not have had access to these practices. Judy was the first person who introduced a lot of these concepts to me. And my parents were not very spiritual. They were in their own way. But I was able to, it was just a doorway for me to be exposed to these ideas, and it never stopped. So I just want to thank you, Judy, so much for giving yourself to me at that time, and now to be here and be a part of this, and to hear you, to hear all the background of how you got to where you were and how you were able to help myself and so many others. I just, it's been a very nice experience to hear all these things about yourself and your own experiences. So, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Inika. So good to see you.
Okay. Thank you, Ineka. Thank you, everybody. I don't know if there is anyone else who wants to comment or to ask something to Judy. For me, I have to say it's been amazing to hear about your legacy, because it's a legacy that you're sharing with us today, and it's so important that we remain always open to 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 keep on learning. You know that there is, and when you were telling us about this child that repeatedly did the same volcano and the same volcano and the same volcano, and then all of a sudden he decided the volcano was not going to explode. You know, like, it reminded me also from my own teachers, and I from the expressive arts background that I have. They say repetition is always good. Repetition is always good. You know, so I just, yeah, it's kept me to this thought, like, okay, so Judith, eventually, you know, like, you allow him to repeat as many times as he wanted, you know, and I found that fantastic. Anyway, there is one more question. I'm gonna invite Laura to. Laura Barrantes is a friend of mine from Costa Rica, and yeah, I let her.
Hello. Well, I want to thank Judith. I enjoyed her speech, and I was painting during the webinar. I sent to you what I was doing, and also is very thanks to you. And she took the best place to live and to give to the nature, and to I hope the best for you and for Judith and for his group. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you so much. That's wonderful.
Yes, I want to just say that my Spanish isn't good enough to give a whole talk in Spanish, but it's constantly improving, and I can work with people in Spanish.
Yeah. So
also my English is not too good, but I tried.
Good.
Thank you very much.
very good. Anyway, Judith, I thank you again for your time, for your stories, for your experience, and for all this legacy that you shared today with us. So, and with that, I also thank everybody who is today present. I have to say, normally we get 30 people subscribe and then only 10 arrived, but this time it's full. We have the 28 people are here. So success, Judy, success. And with that, I thank you all, and I wish you a very beautiful weekend. So stay tuned for more beautiful people like Judy, who's willing to spend time with us. So
Thank you, Judy
Thank
and
you.
Sylvia. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Judy.
Goodbye. So good.